Hello, my name is Ryan. I'm with Halt the Harm Network. I'm so honored to be here today. We have some fantastic guests. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about the new report released by Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is all about forever chemicals and fracking. And to talk about the report, we're joined by Dusty Horwit, the author of the report itself. And we also have Barb Gottlieb with Physicians for Social Responsibility and Ranjana Bhandari from Livable Arlington. So we're really excited to have a panel today to talk about this. The format that we're going to follow is we're going to give you a briefing of what the report is about. So if you missed the earlier press conference webinar at noon, or if you haven't had a chance to look at the report, you're going to get a brief summary. We're going to talk a little bit about the significance of what this means to those of us who are affected by fracking and involved in challenging the oil and gas industry to protect our communities, protect our health and environment. So really excited to have Dusty here to kick things off and tell us a little bit about the report. So welcome, Dusty, and also, thank you so much for all the work that you've put into this. This is a big day for all of us, and especially you, with how much work you've put into breaking this news.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I appreciate Halt the Harm for hosting this webinar, and thanks everybody for joining. I'll give a brief overview, as Ryan said, of the report. And as Ryan also mentioned, there's a longer summary that you can watch on a recorded webinar that Physicians for Social Responsibility hosted earlier today. So the report published by Physicians for Social Responsibility today and featured in a story in the New York Times details the evidence we found that suggests that oil and gas companies are using PFAS or chemicals that could break down into PFAS in more than 1,200 oil and gas wells in 6 different states in the US. PFAS are also known as per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. I know that's a mouthful, but they're called PFAS for short, and they are known for being extremely toxic, persistent in the environment, and for bioaccumulating inside people and inside animals. And because of their persistence in the environment, they are often referred to as forever chemicals. So PFAS, you may be familiar with, probably the most high profile use of PFAS over the years is Teflon in Teflon coated pans. It's been used widely throughout the economy for decades in stain-resistant carpeting, waterproof clothing. PFAS as a class are known for their oil and water resistance, but they're also extremely toxic. And all that information about their toxicity came out around the year 2000 when attorney Rob Bilott, who appeared on a previous Halt the Harm webinar and was featured in the feature film that was shown this weekend by Halt the Harm, Dark Waters, filed a lawsuit against DuPont for pollution related to PFOA, which is the most infamous of the PFAS chemicals. And it came out that companies that made and used PFAS knew for years that these chemicals were extremely toxic and persistent, but they didn't tell anyone. And now, for the first time in this report that Physicians for Social Responsibility has released today, we're showing that these chemicals, or chemicals that break down into them, have been used in oil and gas fracking, at least in a number of US states: Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico, Texas, and Wyoming. And that does not mean that is the limit of these chemicals' use geographically or in different stages of oil and gas development, such as drilling or other types of oil and gas extraction, not just fracking, but also things like water flooding, acid fracturing. These chemicals could be used in these other stages and techniques. And they could be used in the Marcellus, where Halt to Harm members are many of them are located. A couple other things I want to say about the report is that the report began in 2014 with a Freedom of Information Act request that I was involved in sending to the EPA, asking for the EPA's regulatory determinations and health reviews of chemicals that chemical manufacturers had proposed for use in oil and gas drilling or fracking. This occurred under the EPA's New Chemicals Review Program, which is part of the Toxic Substances Control Act. And I didn't even know until just before sending this Freedom of Information request that EPA had this regulatory role, because as a lot of people on this webinar may know, the oil and gas industry has succeeded over the years in exempting itself from significant portions of most major federal environmental laws. But EPA did have and does have this role in regulating new chemicals proposed for use in oil and gas drilling. In response to our request, EPA gave us over several years thousands of pages of documents, and buried in this digital stack of records were documents showing that EPA had reviewed 3 chemicals proposed for use in oil and gas drilling or fracking, and had approved them for commercial use in 2011, despite the fact that EPA regulators thought that these chemicals could break down in the environment into a substance like PFOA, the very same substance that was featured in the movie Dark Waters. And despite the fact that EPA found serious health concerns about these chemicals. One of those 3 chemicals later went into commercial use. We can't know where because there are extensive confidentiality claims in the
Als Traumbild vorschwebte, ist geworden. Das Symbol der Klasseneinigung.
being hacked.
That was a first. Okay. Dusty,
Yeah.
go on.
Okay,
That was a pretty remarkably tasteless first, I have to say.
yeah. So I'll continue to just finish up in a moment here. So the EPA reviewed these chemicals, these 3 chemicals, allowed them to be used commercially. One of the 3 chemicals actually went into commercial use. We can't know where because of the confidentiality claims that withhold, among other things, the chemical's specific identity. And as many people on this webinar probably know, the same sort of thing also happens at the state level, where fracking companies have to make chemical disclosure. They can also withhold chemical identities as confidential there. But what we were able to do is we took the generic name of this chemical from these records, which was fluorinated acrylic alkylamino copolymer, and we searched for that generic name in the Frack Focus database, which folks may know is a repository of fracking chemical disclosure from thousands of wells across the country, across more than 20 states. It's an imperfect database, but it does give some idea of what chemicals are being used in fracking. And we did not find any usages of this particular chemical that EPA had regulated, but we did find that 6 chemicals with similar names had been used in more than 1,200 wells in 6 different states that I mentioned before. We looked in an EPA database of PFAS chemicals. 2 of those chemicals showed up in the database. We ran the chemicals by 4 different chemistry and health experts, and they said that yes, these chemicals either are PFAS, they could be PFAS, or they could be chemicals that could break down into PFAS. So there's a lot of evidence that PFAS are chemicals that could break down into PFAS. actually have been used in these more than 1,200 wells. And we're concerned, as I mentioned, that that is not the extent of the use of these chemicals. They could be used in the Marcellus, in other states that did not show up in our frac focus search. And our greater concerns, physicians with social responsibilities, additional concerns are that people are going to be exposed to these chemicals in oil and gas operations, especially because there is a growing amount of evidence that we know that people living near oil and gas operations disproportionately suffer health impacts such as cancer, low birth weight babies, respiratory harms, and some of these overlap with the health impacts that have been established for PFAS chemicals, including cancer and low birth weight babies. So I think that's a pretty good summary of the report. I'll stop now and I'll let other people jump in. And Ryan, if you want to ask follow-up questions, please do.
Yeah, and I also want to say hi to Marty, who's here from Halt to Harm, in case you want to jump in at any point, Marty. So yeah, thank you, Dusty, for giving that overview. And I'm going to post a link in the chat directly to the report as well, just so that everybody has access to that. And I wanted to ask and also invite Barb to, Barb, if you want to add anything to what Dusty said, just about the work of putting together this report and the significance of it, and also bring Ranjana into the conversation. All right, sorry, I realized that I have a mute issue, so give me just a moment and I'm going to remove that restriction. Sorry, Barb and Ranjana and Marty.
Okay.
Why am I talking to myself? Okay.
Okay, not a problem.
Great
Well,
to see
first
you.
of all, yeah, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I was with Dusty on the earlier webinar, and now I'm really excited because I looked through the names of the people who are here today, at least the ones that I could see, and I know virtually none of you, which to me is great. Very it kind of emboldening to be talking to new folks and new allies. So I guess just thinking about I mean, Dusty gave you the overview of the report, but thinking about kind of what it all means, I feel like what this is telling us about fracking is that it's terrifying, and we already knew that, right? Like, it's not as if fracking wasn't dangerous enough with the long list of toxic chemicals and endocrine disrupting chemicals and so on that we know are already used, and that the communities that especially those communities that are in proximity to fracking are already facing. But here we have another highly, highly toxic chemical that joins that list of fracking chemicals, and it continues to endanger human health. As Dusty mentioned, it's called a forever chemical because it lasts pretty much, practically speaking, forever in the environment. That's what the scientists call persistent. It's also what they call bioaccumulative, meaning, and forgive me if I'm telling you things you already know. Again, I don't know the audience, but bioaccumulative is simply that it builds up in the human body. Once you've been exposed and ingested or otherwise absorbed this chemical, it doesn't go away. It doesn't wash out of your body. It stays. And that means that every exposure from whatever source, not just from fracking, becomes cumulative, one building on top of the other, and then therefore potentially raising your risk factors. Another thing about these PFAS chemicals in fracking is that we really have to worry about it across the entire supply chain. So pretty obviously, in the wells where it gets injected as part of that witch's brew that goes down into the wells. But as a largely waterborne chemical, we have to worry about where does it go after that? Does it get into aquifers? It comes back up with a wastewater. Where does the wastewater go? The wastewater a lot of times gets hauled away in trucks that are carried, through your communities. and might be dumped in underground injection wells in Ohio, or might be spread on icy roads in your community. There are just so many, such a spectrum of possible points of exposure. So that's another worry. I guess the big question that we all want to be thinking about is what to do about it. Spoiler alert, I don't have the answer, but I think that the fact of us being here indicates that we know what is the right direction to look in. So first of all, we need more visibility for these issues. This report, the press coverage, and events like this one and future events to come are helping us to get that visibility. Secondly, we're bringing this information to new audiences. So I'm not really suggesting that you guys are the new audience in regard to fracking. You guys are the base in terms of fracking. But I'm also thinking about the great work that Halt the Harm Network did this past weekend, showing the Dark Waters film, and the work that we can all do together moving forward, reaching out to what is actually a large community of organizations and individuals fighting against PFAS, because PFAS is not a new issue. It's a very kind of a painfully well-known issue in the environmental and chemicals community. And there are a lot of people who've been fighting it for a long time. So I think that having the visibility and the allies, what we then need to do is to look for the places on the ground where we can bring those elements together and really start weaving these new facts into the fights that you're already fighting. I know that Dusty and I are looking in particular at the Delaware River Basin Commission. We're looking at policy in the state of Pennsylvania. We're looking at fights in the Ohio River Valley. And I'm sure that there's much more that you guys are involved in, and I look forward to learning about. I'll just mention one other small detail, which is that the report that Dusty wrote concludes with some recommendations. Several of them are directed to the EPA. And we have a letter to the EPA calling on them to carry out those are the recommendations that are relevant to them. That's on the PSR website at psr.org. And I invite each and every one of you to read that letter, and if so moved, add your name to it. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Barb. And we'll put the link to that letter in the chat as well, or if somebody else does it before I do, just so we can all have a chance to get to it. psr.org, not too hard to remember though. So Ranjana is the founder of Livable Arlington, and it would be great to hear from you, Ranjana, about your reaction to this report coming out and some of the work that you're doing.
Hello, Ryan. Thanks, Marty and Ryan, for having me on, and thanks to PSR for this report. For people I don't know here, I belong to Livable Arlington, and we live in Arlington, Texas, which is a frontline fracking community on top of the Barnett Shale. And so my first reaction to this report is the bad news keeps piling up. The bad news about the impacts, especially on frontline communities, on our children, keeps piling up, but there is no momentum yet for official action. And I also want to say just a couple of things about how much fracking we have where we live. So Arlington is a city of 400,000 people. It is the second most diverse city in the state of Texas, the 38th most diverse city in America. We have 52 drill sites, 400 gas wells. The numbers are climbing. And a lot of this drilling here happens practically in our backyards, next door to our preschools, to our children's schools. 30,000 of our children go to school less than a half a mile from a drill site. So in light of all of that, this is very alarming. And a few years ago, the state regulator tried to put an injection well for disposing wastewater right next to our water source, which provides water to 500,000 people in this county. So given all those facts on the ground here, this is extremely alarming. And great concern. And I think we want to learn more. So thanks for this invitation. Thanks for these public events today. And I think it's really important to find out where these chemicals were used and how they were disposed of, how that flowback was disposed of. So I'll stop here.
Thanks, Rajana. I think, I just wanted to jump in and remind everybody, so Halt the Harm is a network. It's not our position. These aren't our campaigns. They're the campaigns of other peers. And when we heard that Dusty was working on this and knew that Barb was trying to get it out, and knowing how it relates to so many campaigns around injection wells and landfills and pipelines and bans and moratoriums and truck traffic and god awful million campaigns that everybody's fighting against, this felt like an important connection to another audience. The PFAS Forever Chemicals campaign is pretty large and well organized as well. And we hope that you guys, that we can work with you to kind of connect with those and build more power to win more campaigns. And really felt like, if you haven't seen it, the noon meeting was really great. Fire Chief, Wilma Subra, scientist, Dusty, who else am I forgetting? Dusty, somebody else. It'll come to me. But there's a great briefing, kind of a read in, and in the movie this weekend, hopefully kind of got people up to speed on these chemicals. And I think today is really about questions. What briefings do you need? What other background do you need? And then how do we get together and organize different campaigns in support of your work? I think that's where we want to go this week. This isn't just about learning, it's about, supporting you and your campaigns and taking action. So, first and foremost is just asking questions. Dusty and Barb and Rajana and the people who have worked on this are us. And they're very approachable and they're available for help. So they're really gracious for giving us some time. So questions in there would be really good. Oh yeah, Linda Birnbaum, great, thank you.
Yeah, so if anybody has a question or comment to add to the chat, please do. And I think one of the big questions, which you just brought up, Marty, which I feel like we could dig into more, is the significance of this and kind of how to use the revelations in this report to, further gain try to gain more protections, or further hold the line. You've said that this was like a new front in the fight. I imagine that some of us might be feeling like, okay, so we're just finding out, more of what we kind of already knew, like these are really dangerous. And Barbie brought that up as well. And the other feeling that comes up is it just feels so overwhelming, like what you said, Ranjana, about adding more bad news to the heap of bad news. And so I would love to hear some ideas about, how we work with that, what we can do with that information. Because that's one of the things that we come up against when we're trying to engage with the public, is just, we come off as there's an aversion to negativity, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to think about this. And so how do we break through that? And how do we use this issue as something that can be galvanizing and also strategic? So Denny, maybe I didn't ask a very clear question. One question that I have that's maybe more specific is, what's the strategic opportunity here? Because one of the things that happens is, we could focus on the big picture, like ending the fossil fuel industry, and we could focus on changing a small regulation that maybe makes the process more expensive and less viable for the industry, right? And so if we focus on just this issue, are we ignoring the big picture? If we focus on the big picture, are we not taking advantage of these industry bottlenecks? I these weak points. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, the strategic value of this? Oh, you're muted. Did you end up getting stuck in the mute? I'm sorry, everyone. Oh my goodness. Here I'm like trying to run the technology at the same time as I'm talking. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Ryan, I think people are just muted. If they raise their hand, Mary, can you see who needs to be unmuted? They can raise their hands and then you can turn them on. Sorry.
All right, perfect. Thanks everyone for bearing with me here. This is great. Great turnout, by the way. This, it's good to be a little overwhelmed by the technical stuff with so many different things happening, right?
No, it's not.
It's not. Okay.
Let's get it done. So yeah, Mary's muted. And yes, Food and Water Watch. There are Environmental Defense, EWG. There's a lot of groups out there that are doing work on this. We'll try and make more of their resources, pull them together. And I see Mary's unmuted, so I'll be quiet.
Yeah, so I see this relating in two ways to the work that we are in a deep fight in Ohio around the radioactive oil and gas waste spreading of fracking water, and just adding it to the list of why it's dangerous. Other than radioactive, other than the fact that it's radioactive, we knew there was lots of other stuff in it that was bad, but just want confirmation that it probably will translate and would also be in the brine. So that's one. And then two is Ohio Department of Natural Resources is asking for comments on their draft rules for the injection wells. And I think we can add that to the list too. And just kind of confirming, your thoughts on that, and from what you know on what you found out, and whether those connections are valid.
Dusty or Barb, you want to jump on that one? Oh, Ryan, I think you have to unmute Dusty.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, we're definitely going to use the hand raising feature.
Okay.
And then we'll go to Rajana.
Okay.
I would say it is likely that it is in the brine or the wastewater. We know that EPA has said that a portion of the chemicals that are injected down the wells come back up in the wastewater. So I would rely on what EPA says in this case. Because this is a new issue, the association of PFAS and fracking, I doubt that there has been much testing where you could actually say we tested the wastewater and we did find these chemicals in it. There should be sometime soon, but I think you're on very solid ground saying EPA says chemicals injected down the well do come back up in the wastewater, and so we should assume that these chemicals are in the wastewater. And as I mentioned before, even though we did not find evidence that these chemicals are being used in Ohio, the fact that they're being used widely, and the fact that some of the companies that use these chemicals, including Exxon's subsidiary XTO and Chevron, operate in Ohio, should cause you and your neighbors to say, what are they doing in Ohio in terms of PFAS? We know that Exxon and Chevron were using PFAS in other states. They're operating here in Ohio, so could they be using PFAS in Ohio? That's a very legitimate question to ask. Just in terms of the larger issue about how do we talk about this issue, my experience is that on oil and gas issues, and I think this is probably true for all issues, is that people do tend to sort of have our interest piqued and gravitate toward what is new. And this is a new finding. So, if people have already heard some things about drilling and fracking, like there's benzene or there's radium, although I would never assume that everybody knows that. They could hear that there's forever chemicals involved in fracking and sort of be newly interested in the issue or interested in the issue in a way that perhaps they weren't before. So it seems like a good issue to tell people about, especially because there's a growing sort of cultural awareness, I think, of PFAS and the risks associated with PFAS.
Great. Rajana, you wanted to jump in. You're on mute. Ryan, can you unmute her?
Yep.
So, there is a lot to absorb here. So I'm going to just see if I can go in order. So the first thing I noticed, XTO is one of the companies that fracks where I live. A couple of other things. So we discovered that our county has the highest rate of birth defects of any county in Texas. But nobody has tried to do an epidemiological study to see what might be contributing to this high rate. And then going back to what Mary just said about, wastewater disposal in injection wells. I've talked about very briefly about how we successfully fought that off, which meant, we subjected other communities to live with the effects of our wastewater. But there's also this other issue that is potentially pretty serious here. A lot of that wastewater stays in the formation, right? It doesn't all come back in flow back. So we're looking now at close to 55 drill sites where, a lot of this, a lot of chemicals stay down hole, will potentially over time, I suppose, spread through the formation, contaminating groundwater, contaminating soil. And so this is a pretty nightmare scenario. And then going back to what Ryan said, how does this help the movement? I know that when you live in an oil and gas state like Texas, and because of all the regulatory exemptions that fracking has enjoyed, there's this sense that it couldn't possibly be this bad, because why else would our government permit it? I think it's really important to take this kind of news and make it available. So the New York Times story was great, but I think it needs to filter down to local news sources in ways that people become aware of it, because regardless of the support people have for fossil fuels here, because this is Texas, nobody wants their children poisoned. Nobody wants their water poisoned. This is something we've seen over and over again. People support oil and gas, but they don't support groundwater contamination, water contamination. So that's just what I wanted to say, that I think this helps. It helps the movement even in places where there's a lot of support for oil and gas. I'll stop.
Okay, thanks. Lori Costello, Ryan, if you see she had her hand raised.
All right. Welcome.
Thanks, Rajana.
Welcome, Lori.
Hi, thanks. I just, I guess I can turn on my video. I just really appreciate what Ranjana just said about people support oil and gas, but they don't support the groundwater contamination. Well, they don't support anything else, like, the high methane and air pollution and asthma problems and all the things that we have in Colorado from our fracking here that everybody has who has fracking, right? And so this morning on the webinar, Sandra Steingraber, who was instrumental in getting fracking banned in New York, says, why are you guys talking about regulating this and that and the other? Why don't you just ban fracking? And my comment in the chat is about, look, this is about the American people versus corporate profit. This is industry all over, including the medical industrial complex that doesn't want Medicare for all. If we had universal health care, and doctors knew what their patients were exposed to and could order tests. I mean, none of these things are even available in a lab if a doctor wanted to test for them. And since we know every American has these forever chemicals in their bloodstream, but we can't even test for them, can't treat them anyway. But pretending that none of this exists is not going to get us anywhere. So we're all in our silos. And I really felt that watching Dark Waters this weekend. I love that movie. And I mean, this guy has committed his life to fighting DuPont. And so what? DuPont pays, a few percent of their profit in fines and goes on killing us. And this has been going on for decades and decades and decades. So I feel like we are stuck in these rabbit holes when the big picture, the emperor has no clothes. So I wonder, I mean, it's grassroots and nonprofits who are supporting everything, all these of the people kind of projects, and we just continue to not be supported on the level we need to be, which is regulatory. I mean, regulations are protections for the American people. And so people who don't want regulations obviously don't want the health of the American people. And the reason they don't is because they want their profits more. So that's my jaded comment.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Barb.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I hear some very understandable frustration here. And I also hear some slightly, well, I hear that there are different directions that we can go in. I mean, we can try to secure healthcare for all, and we can, I mean, there are some very substantial systemic criticisms of capitalism as well. And at the same time, we can also fight for regulation. I do want to make it clear that PSR's position is most definitely that we oppose fracking and we call for a ban on fracking. That's PSR's position. Sometimes we take a more tactical position and push for what we think will, well, sometimes what we can get, but sometimes what we think will really move the needle a little bit in a concrete way, in a substantive way. And in regard to this particular report, we are pushing for regulatory action. Pushing for it doesn't mean we'll get it, but that's a very viable kind of field of battle right now. But I'd like to go back to what Ranjana was saying about the need to put out the word to people who, may not know the ins and outs and may not have great sympathy to us, but who care about their kids, care about their communities, and care about their health. That's really such a wonderful unifying and largely non-politicized approach to the issue. So one of the simple steps that you can do right now, and again, I'm not pretending this is the answer or is going to slay the dragon, but I think we have to look for the concrete steps we can take based on the opportunities at hand. As Dusty was saying, people do want to hear what's new. This report's findings are new. So well, first of all, we're trying to get press coverage in local press, not just the New York Times. The New York Times is great, but it's really great as a springboard from which to reach others. So if you can look in the chat and get the link to the New York Times article, Krishna Roy posted it for us. Thank you very much. And send that to your local newspaper and say, hey, I'm concerned about what's going on in my community. They say these chemicals are being used all over and we don't really know where. You tell me, what's going on in my community, do some investigation, or just send a letter to the editor saying how concerned you are. There's a press release on the PSR website at that same old psr.org/fracking chemicals, where you can pull down some language if you'd like. But I think this is a kind of strike when the iron is hot moment. And this is one very concrete thing that we can all do. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Bonnie, you're going to be next. I just wanted to kind of thumbs up, and then I see Reynard wants to jump on. I do think that it's about persuasion. We all want campaigns and different strategies to succeed, and they all should. A lot of people put a lot of thought, a lot of energy behind each of these strategies. Halt the Harm wants you guys to, find the allies. There's tons of people in here who want to work on a ban. There's some that want, stuff out their back door stopped immediately. So I think tomorrow, this will be a week of stuff. We're supporting Dusty and Barb this week with a series of things. So there'll be more emails. And again, like Barb said, there's press releases and other things you can put out, put your own spin on and get it in the paper. This is always about persuading new people to get involved in this, to build power. We're so grateful. And Bonnie, you wanted to jump in?
Well, I'm from New York State, where we theoretically banned fracking. However, I'm 10 miles from the Pennsylvania border, and our particular area was the housing for Schlumberger's production of all sorts of fracking backdrop stuff for West Virginia, for Ohio, for New York, and for Pennsylvania. Sandra Steingraber is a friend, and so is Morris Stevens, who's here today. And we have been fighting for 11 years, and we are still dealing with our local landfill that accepts fracking waste from Pennsylvania. So although New York doesn't have fracking, we're still dealing with a lot of it. And I'm going to say the 11 years has been tiring. And I think that many of us in this area have gotten tired. I felt re-energized by the movie, and I'm very thankful that you sent it. I forwarded it on to people in North Carolina and in Virginia and all over the Southeast. And I think that that's a large part of what you can do is, again, we considered ourselves more educators. We were protesters, but educators. And in this particular area, it's a very conservative upstate New York area. We have not been as successful as we had hoped, but I think that the New York Times report and the movie Dark Waters will bring it back into people's area of concern. I know the Food and Water Watch is becoming very active in this again, and even in New York State where they weren't for a while. So I think that's what it has taken, and I'm very thankful for your sending out that movie contact and for having the conference today, because I think we need to re-energize people. This has been a long battle, and people have grown tired, but I certainly was re-energized by watching the movie. So thank you very much.
Great. Ryan Renard? Oh, he's still on mute.
All right, Renard. There you go.
Unmute. Hold on. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Lots of folks on this meeting know me and know my film Groundswell Rising, Protecting Our Children's Air and Water. If you don't know the film, it's on Amazon Prime. But if you send me an email at Renco, RENCO, at P as in Peter, T as in Tom, D as in dog.net, Renco at ptd.net, I will send you a private Vimeo link so that you can see the film and you can share it. Raina Ripple's in the film, Sandra Steingraber's in the film, Mark Ruffalo's in the film, Walter Sauer's in the film. And so it's a very important tool, and it has been used to help get bans on fracking in Scotland, in Maryland, in Florida. So please utilize the tool of Groundswell Rising. Now, one of the folks in the film, Maya Van Rossen, who is from Delaware Riverkeepers Network, has a new group now, and it's very important, called Green Amendments for the Generations. And she is working to get green amendments on the state constitutions and then the federal constitutions, because only 2 states have it, Pennsylvania and Montana. And as you know, as soon as a new administration gets in, they roll back all the progress that we've made. But if there are amendments to the constitutions of the states, and also hopefully finally to a federal constitutions, they won't be able to do that. So an organization that I have called artistsforearth.com, ARTISTS, the number 4 earth.com. Please go to that site. We have world-class artists who are donating their work to raise money for Food and Water Watch, for Delaware Riverkeepers Network, and Green Amendments for the Generations. That's who we're working with, Maya, and trying to get these amendments, the state constitutions, the federal constitutions. So thank you so much. Please watch Groundswell Rising. Send me a link if you need it. Share it. And I appreciate everybody's work. and let's keep going, and let's not give up the fight. Thank you.
Yeah, and for anybody that didn't get all of those things, that are in the chat, and if you didn't get them, shoot us just a reply back to Ryan. Ryan will make sure you get the contact information in the chat string.
Great,
Great.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ranjana, did you want to say something about regulations?
Hang on just a sec. Yes. Am I still muted? No.
No, you're good.
Okay. I just want to quickly say that, as a tactical position, which would have national impact, we should all really think about getting the Halliburton loophole repealed, which exempts fracking from the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is how all these chemicals are allowed to be pumped downhole into the ground. I think a fracking ban would be great. It is long overdue. I can speak to that because, I live in a frontline community, but regional bans make life worse for other sacrifice zones. And this is something to keep in mind. I think children in Texas suffer more because there are production and extraction bans in some parts of the world. Total, a French conglomerate, is the biggest fracker here, even though there's a ban on fracking in France. So, if we don't have an end to fossil fuel consumption, regional bans make some parts of the world much more, suffer a lot more. So I think as a tactical position, a repeal of the Halliburton loophole, this is one more instance where we are learning that frackers should not be allowed to pump toxic chemicals underground. So anyway, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Rajana. Yeah, I think tomorrow there's definitely going to be.
I want to mute.
Right, you need to. Yeah, there you go. I think one of the important things, the reason that this is different than some of those great allied groups like Food and Water Watch, Halt the Harm doesn't pick a single position. We really focus on connecting you guys to each other and let you sort it out. And there's going to be tension, and there's going to be disagreement, and there's going to be different politics on the ground within a state, across the states. It's a very diverse network from that position. So I think tomorrow, we knew we weren't going to be able to solve all this today in a single hour. There's been people working their whole lives on that. So we've given it an extra hour tomorrow. But we're gonna keep working on these campaigns. There's a lot of stuff in the chat, and we want to make sure that if you have ideas, or you're looking for partners to kind of work with you on your ideas or come up with talking points or kits, that's what tomorrow is. We can definitely use, Dusty and Barb could definitely use your help in getting the word out locally. I think Frack Tracker's map is going to come out on Thursday, and they're going to have local releases. If you know people and in the affected states, they'll probably have talking points and other things that you can use. So it's really about pushing that on your your own social media, out with your own groups, and getting the support that you need. Lots of good connections with great state leaders as well. There is a map of all of the members of Halt the Harm, so you can find other people in your state. There is a map to find the national leaders, and again, we keep launching services and resources for you in running your campaigns. You don't get the policy opinions from Ryan and I, but you do get the support, how to weaponize it, how to run your campaigns. So I don't know if Barb or Dusty, you wanted to talk just a little bit more, and then any of you who have campaigns, be on the lookout for the follow-up. There'll also be the links tomorrow, but Ryan, if you can unmute Dusty and Barb, that'd be good. And Rajan at some point when she asks.
Yeah, you got it. And I'm also posting the link for tomorrow's meetup. It doesn't look fancy or have a really fancy title, but it is a meetup at 2:00 tomorrow, where we can talk a little bit more about coordinating efforts around campaigns.
Oh, one other thing, there is a conference, a national conference on PFAS, on this class of chemicals. It's on Wednesday. It's an online conference. They were not talking about fracking. some of the scientists, I'm sure, will talk about PSR and Dusty's incredible report, but it's not on the agenda right now to talk about fracking. It's one of those new intersections between us and another movement. And so we are going to send around that link and encourage Halt the Harm Network members to attend that conference and listen, learn about the science. And then I think we might do an after party where we can invite some of their people to get to know us and do the same online, just a debrief of what we learn about PFAS and fracking on Wednesday afternoon. So that'll also be coming. Barb?
Just to say that, well, as Marty was saying, we haven't solved the problem today. And there's not just one path forward, but we do need to support one another. I think, there's being in unity doesn't mean that we all do the same thing and follow the same track. It means that we're all facing in the same direction and we're pulling forward as best we can. PSR looks forward to working with you and contributing whatever we can contribute that will help. And so feel free to call on us.
I second that, and yeah, stand ready to help anyone in their local fights, including one specific thought that I sort of mentioned earlier is that if you have an oil and gas company operating near you and you think it might be a company that used PFAS or chemicals that could break down into PFAS in other states, let us know, and we can look at our records and see if the company did in fact use these chemicals. It might be a good issue to press with your local decision makers.
Rajana? Final thoughts from the day?
Dusty, how would we reach out to you if we wanted that information? And a final thought, I think, more bad news is in some sense more material to work with. So I second what Barb just said, that, in our different circumstances with with different strategies, tactics, and different people we have to appeal to, we still need to kind of be unified because different things work in different places. But yeah, if somebody could put in chat how we can contact Dusty to find out if those chemicals were used where we are, that would be great. Thanks, everybody.
I just posted my contact information.
Thank you.
Don't give it to that earlier, people. Make sure we keep Dusty, keep Dusty accessible to everybody there. All right. Well, this has been really good. I'm sure it's an exhausting day for Dusty. A bunch of people were up at early morning seeing websites turn on and whatnot. So really excited. There are some great links that we're going to encourage you to watch there. But Ryan, I don't know if you've seen Jenny's song.
Yeah, we can, Jenny, if you're all right with it, we can go out with your song.
Well, I'll go out with Jenny's song and have a great time. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Follow up on the emails that we'll send out with all these resources.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see everyone today. All right, Jenny, thanks for sharing this. Here we go.
Thanks.
It's growing! This movement is growing! It's growing throughout the state. It's growing throughout the United States. It's growing throughout the world. And as it grows, more and more eyes are keeping watch. And we're blogging and we're reporting on the going up and down for natural gas, looking for gas so they can get rich. They'll do anything to dig that ditch. They'll say it's safe, they'll say it's clean to frack that well. They'll say anything. Don't be a fool, don't sign on the line, or you'll be sorry in due time. 'Cause you can't drink money. No, you can't drink money. No. What you gonna do when your water turns blue? Everybody's sick and you are too. Oh, you can't drink money. That's right. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, sorry to hear you sold your land to the gas and the oil man. Yes, you bought his lies, or maybe it's true that you do anything to get rich too. You sell your soul, your healthy life, all the trees, the wildlife. Well, now just be warned when your well is cursed, those dollar bills won't quench your thirst. 'Cause you can't drink money. No, you can't drink money. Say now, what you gonna do? Your water turns blue, everybody's sick, and you are too. Oh, you can't drink money. Let me hear ya! No, no. Drinking check with the people of Diamond, Pennsylvania, or Dish, Texas. They'll tell you all about fracking. Oh, don't frack my world. Don't frack my parks. Mr. Gasman, you're breaking my heart with your slick little ads that make it seem like you're the second coming with a drilling machine. The devil himself could make that out if you were in your toxic wells. But the devil don't have what the oil man got. That's deep pockets in a prime time spot. Oh, you can't drink money. Oh, you can't drink money. Oh, say, oh, what you gonna do when the water turns blue and everybody's sick, including me and you? Even the gas man's sick as he's driving away, looking for another sucker he can't pay. Oh, you can't drink money. Oh, you can't drink money. Oh, you can't drink money. You can't drink money. You can't drink money. You can't drink money. Yeah! Keep going! Keep up the fight!
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. Thank you, Jenny. That was awesome. And wanted to make sure everybody knew about how Halt the Harm Network works to keep us connected. If you go to network.halttheharm.net, and I'm going to put a link in the chat, you can see that what we have here is a social platform that's set up where you can have a profile that's different than any other social profiles. You know, you don't have to, you know, it's very specific to your interest in these topics. And inside the network, you can connect with other people. You can see who else is here. You can see the list of members. You can see who's online at any given moment. You can post whatever's on your mind. We have an events calendar. We have a series of topics that over time start to build a knowledge base of the things that we're sharing, the conversations that we're having. Being able to use a search to very quickly find something, like if you look up the word, you know, radioactive, you start seeing like conversations that we've had about radioactive oil and gas waste. So you can kind of imagine the value of this as people in Texas and Colorado and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio and New York and anywhere that's affected by this industry is starting to share things more and more. And we have some really exciting things coming up in the network. So make sure that you set up your profile. And if you need any help, just reach out to me. I'm happy to do that. And so with that sort of final words, just want to thank you and say goodbye, and we'll see you at the next event.